Hello, hi, my name is Kerry Hudson. I chose Andrea Dunbar for the History is in the Making project because I think she, although was always recognised as a great talent of her time, never really received the acknowledgement she needed for the contribution she made to the wider literary landscape. As you will know from reading my piece, I assume, Andrea Dunbar wrote her first play at the age of 15 in Green Biro and became the youngest playwright ever to premiere at the Royal Court Theatre with the Arbour. She did all this from a really turbulent home life, from her life on the Barshaw estate in Bradford, and experienced during her career many difficulties, including domestic violence, alcoholism. Sadly, she passed away just a few months before her 30th birthday in her local pub from a brain hemorrhage. What I was really interested in is what might Andrea Dunbar have done had she been making her work in today's climate. How would social media have changed the way that she was received? How would today's media change the way she was received as a working class writer? And I also really just want to acknowledge that for me, as someone who comes from a working class background, who grew up on estates similar to Andrea Dunbar's, who's forged a path in the literary community, as is evidenced by sitting here talking with the Royal Society of Literature, that she was really a trailblazer for us. She laid those foundations. She created a foundation on which we could build a tradition of writing from your own experience and having that valued by the literary community, and also feeling that our voices were worthy and our stories deserved to be heard. So this is really a thank you to Andrea Dunbar, and I hope that it reads as such. Obviously, Andrea drew enormously from her own life. I'm sure you've all heard the saying, write what you know, and that's kind of slightly maligned now. You know, people think that's kind of almost like a lazy way of choosing to write, but there's actually a real craft and a skill in taking your life and learning to communicate it in a way that is valuable for the reader and which speaks for your intention as a writer. I have always written from my own experience, largely because that's just really what I'm interested in as a writer. I want to understand myself, I want to understand the world around me. And I really also felt like it was important, as I think Andrea did, to show stories from streets that are not seen so often in books, that aren't seen so often in plays or films. So I thought I'd read a little bit from my first novel, which has the ridiculous title, Tony Hogan Bought Me an Ice Cream Float Before He Stole My Ma. So I used to get asked a lot how much of this is true, and I used to say about 97%. And that's pretty much the truth. What I effectively did was use my life as the sort of bones of the narrative. And then I use fictional tricks, little smoke and mirror tricks to pack in the meat on that bones to make it a fully formed thing. And I'm going to read you just a really short segment from the book. So the book is from Janie Ryan, the child protagonist's perspective, and this is from her being a baby, this perspective, just to give you an idea of the narrative voice. And what she's observing is an argument between her grandmother, a sort of fierce matriarchal fishwife from Aberdeen, and her mother Iris, who is an incredibly vulnerable young woman who's always had a very troubled relationship with her mother. So this is Janie on her cushions on the sofa observing this argument, this fight unfurl between her mother and her grandmother. Ma stared down at the muddy plate of mixed food, her lips set firm. Well, I'm not doing it, and you can't make me. Grandma put down her knife and fork, food half finished, and reached for her fags. While you're in my house, you bloody well will. You'd think you've forgotten who turned up on my doorstep without a penny to your name or a father for your bairn. Grandma didn't raise her voice, though there was steel there, cold, sharp, and ready to cut. But Ma wasn't afraid. She was used to her own Ma's slicing words. What? And have her dragged around from pub to pub like we all were? And what's that supposed to mean? At least I could keep a man, someone for you all to call your dad. It wasn't one man, was it? It was three, and what a fucking bunch of charmers and all. Grandma took a puff of her fag and stubbed it out. At least they stuck around and helped to bring some money in, and yours hasn't. And that's why, my ungrateful wee daughter, you've got to go to work. From my cocoon of pillows on the sofa, I saw the gleam of knife and fork in my ma's tight white knuckles. And where are they now, Ma, your army of men? Are you keeping them under a sink, eh? Or maybe you rush off to a penthouse at the Palace Hotel when I'm finished at the fish house. Because the last time I looked, it was just you by yourself in this wee flat. Grandma put down her knife and fork on the plate. Her face crumpled like the air had been sucked from her lips and cheeks. But she rallied, raised her chin, pointed a polished nail at my ma. You ungrateful bitch. To make fun of a poor pensioner who's taken you in out of the kindness of her heart, offering to look after your wee bastard. Oh, and you did such a good job of that on our first day from the hospital, Ma. You're still the same daughter of mine. Irene Ryan, you'll never change. Runt of the litter, a black sheep. Running off to London and getting into God knows what. Running around with a yank who couldn't get shot of you quick enough. You always were a nut job, but I ignored the gossip, held my head high and never loved you any less. Grandma's false teeth slipped out and she snapped them back in. You've never been a proper Ryan. You're nothing but a cuckoo in the nest. I felt myself roll sideways, watching Ma's stunned face upside down before I saw a rush of allure and my arm and shoulder exploded with a thump, my cheek scraping itself against the sour-smelling brown carpet. Silence. A stilling of 6 lungs as Ma and Grandma stared in horror until I screamed. I felt the burn on my silky cheek, the burst of pain in my shoulder, no stronger than pipe cleaners and Play-Doh. My Ma grabbed me. Are you all right? She picked up my limbs and shook each one. Is she all right? She turned to Grandma, who took me in her rough grip. Oh, it's nothing. Look, she's kicking away, and that's just a wee carpet burn. But this is proof. You can't look after yourself. Ma looked over, lips tightening into a line of skin, and put her arms out to take me back. I can see what you're trying to do. You're trying to take my bairn from me, but you can't take this away. She's mine, and you won't get to keep me here by stealing her. So that, I wasn't party to that argument because I was a baby, but I do know that that happened. And I was told the story many, many, many times. And then I sort of pieced together the clues I was given about that to create that narrative and fleshed out with my own imagination. So my grandma always had a brown carpet. The sofas were always a sort of hideous velour. And I think there's real value to writing from your own life, because what can often happen is it adds a sort of depth of authenticity. There's still made up things in there, but the core of the story feels truthful, or at least I really hope it does. So I put together a little thing that maybe you can try at home, which is really looking at how, as Andrea Dunbar did with all of her work, find the conflict, focus in on it, and then let the audience watch it explode. So in this exercise, first you create your characters. That's how I always start when I'm starting to write. In this case, just as an experiment, I would base them on people you know. So you can have just straight out a description of someone you know, or you could take certain characteristics from that person and then fictionalize the rest. You could switch genders, or you could conflate two characters to create one character. And that's something I often do, because sometimes there could be really interesting contrasts and depth in that sort of character. So choose your two characters from life or from parts of life. Then for your setting, I'd like you to put them into an enclosed environment, somewhere they can't leave, where they're trapped with that other person. So what came to my mind was a Christmas dinner table that you're not allowed to leave, you're obliged to stay at. My personal idea of hell. A long car journey, you could have them stuck in a lift. They could be sweating it out at the local leisure centre sauna. Somewhere where they're just obliged to stay in that space with that person to increase that sense of tension and trappedness and sort of the need to lash out. And then finally, you want to decide that one of those characters wants something. They want something from the other character, and the other character is not going to give it to them. They absolutely don't want to. And so I'd like you guys to write an exchange between these two characters trapped in this space together, one of whom wants something, one of whom is not going to give that person it, but without ever mentioning the thing that is wanted and that will not be given. So whether that's permission to borrow the car, or maybe a loan of some money, or they want permission to go off on an overnight trip with their friends, whatever it is, something that other character wants that the other person's going to refuse, but the thing will never be mentioned. So what you're going to have to do is find a way for one character to sneakily try and angle in that request, angle in their desire, and the other person is going to have to find equally sneaky ways to refuse that, to deny that, to avoid it however they can. And just keep experimenting. So much of my work is just writing a scene and seeing what I learned from that scene, and then going in another direction, then going in another direction. Experimentation, I think, is so much of finding the most interesting way to show a character's motives and to make an interesting scene. Thank you so much for reading about Andrea. I hope you find as much value and inspiration in her work as I have.